Iran. Iran is the main player in the Middle East that has historically prevented things from being totally in favor of the U.S. and Israel. Um, Iran's backing of first Hezbollah, Iran's backing of the militias in Syria and Iraq, and now Iran's backing of Hamas has been the equalizer. But it's more than equalizer. It's actually tipped the scale in favor of the anti-Zionist coalition, the axis of resistance, so to speak. And Iran is the only nation that's put its money where its mouth is. None of the Arab states have done that. So, kudos to Iran.
All right. We seem to have an internet connection. Let's keep our fingers crossed and go for another phone call. Hey there, you're on with our favorite weapons inspector on a shaky internet connection from Russia.
Hello, good afternoon. Calling from New Jersey. My question is, I wanted to ask Scott that Ukraine claimed that they shoot down Russian hypersonic missile. Is that a true claim, Scott?
There's no evidence to back this up. Ukraine's claimed that it shot down just about everything Russia sent into it, yet Russia is destroying everything it targets. There's no doubt that some of the advanced anti-air systems that Ukraine has acquired from the West have succeeded in shooting down a number of the geranium drones, but that's the goal. The Russians now have a tactic where they flood the zone, so to speak, with the geranium-2 drones, forcing the air defenses to activate. And then once Russia locates these with their intelligence systems, they strike using other systems to take out the destroy these air defense systems, and then they strike their targets. And this Russian approach has been very efficient. They're devastating the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians themselves have admitted Russia just gutted their defense industry capabilities, and Russia's starting to hit other deep strategic targets. The Kinzhal missile has yet to be shot down. There's no evidence whatsoever that the Kinzhal missile, which is Russia's hypersonic missile, has been shot down by the Ukrainians. When the Ukrainians provide physical evidence, it's not the Kinzhal missile. It's something totally different. So, no, the Ukraine hasn't shot down any Kinzhals.
All right, next question is from Brad Arnold. Much like me, he has two first names in Minneapolis, Minnesota. When the Russian army gets to the Dnieper River, the Duran predicted that Ukraine would fall because of all the vital industry on that vital waterway. I say the West will double their bad bet. How do you think it will go down?
Well, I don't know how the West can double their bad bet. I mean, I don't know what you mean by that. Because let's put it this way. The West, when they provided Ukraine with military equipment, initially they drew down. So they went in, they took weapons that were already built, and they drew them down from their stocks and they gave them to Ukrainians. They don't have any weapons left to give Ukraine. They just don't. So you can't draw down. So the weapons aren't immediately available. Anything that'll come down in the future has to be built, purpose built. So money has to be allocated and resources have to be built. That takes time. That takes years. Ukraine doesn't have it. Ukraine needs weapons right now. These weapons don't exist. So how do you double down on this? This is the decisive year. Ukraine is bankrupt. They have no money. They no money's flowing in. They can't pay any salaries. They have no weapons. They have no new weapons coming in. Denmark just said, hey, we're going to hold off 6 months to give you those F-16s. Why? Because they know in 6 months this war may be over and they're not going to send F-16s out to get shot down for no reason. So, no, I don't think the West can double down. What can the West do? Send in troops? Which troops? Which troops are they going to send? American troops? American troops are going to move into Ukraine? 100,000 of them, 60,000 of which might be combat troops out of Poland. They'll be slaughtered. You will lose a brigade every 3 days. That means that basically in 2 weeks, every American will be dead, and we have nothing to replace them with because we have nothing left. Germany, they don't have an army that can get out of the barracks. The Poles, it's pathetic. They get slaughtered too. Russia's fighting a different style of war right now. It's a drone-based war where drones take the lead. We don't even understand this right now. We don't have tactics to deal with it. We come flowing in with tactics dating back to the 1980s, and the Russians will literally take everything out. So until we redefine our way of doing warfare to meet this new reality. It's like, you could have the finest cavalry in the world, and that might have been good in 1870 or 1880. But in 1914, with the finest cavalry in the world, when you charge forward and they brought out the machine guns, your cavalry got wiped out, got killed. The way Russia deploys drones and employs drones today is the machine gun to NATO's cavalry.
All right, Scott, let's try to get a few more questions in before we do the coin giveaway. And this is the New Year's coin that Scott is giving away to various people in Russia while he's traveling around. And on January 19th at 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time, we'll be doing an episode, I believe, from a Moscow studio with Alexander, your host. Is that correct, Scott?
Yep, we'll do a NASA the Inspector, where we will do a wrap up of the of my Russian visit, and I think there will be a lot more interesting things to talk about at that time.
All right. So January 19th at 12 noon. Hopefully we'll do some one or two things between now and then, but I just want to tell people that's already scheduled, and we can pretty much rely on a good internet connection for that episode, at least. Brian Egger in Wales. I remember reading about a year or so ago about how 2,000 ISIS fighters were taken from one of the camps and flown by U.S. helicopters to Afghanistan and close to the Iranian border. What has happened since then, and could this be linked to recent events?
I don't know if there's any truth to that story. It just seems very far-fetched that the United States would use their helicopters to deploy 2,000 ISIS fighters. The reason why I say that is I'm somewhat familiar with U.S. covert helicopter operations, and I know what it takes to do a black helicopter mission. And 2,000 ISIS troops ain't a covert mission. I mean, that is about as overt as it gets. So it's a little far-fetched. And I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories about how the United States created ISIS, and I happen to agree that we did facilitate the creation of ISIS, but it was more of an act of omission as opposed to an act of commission. What I mean by that is we sort of let ISIS happen as opposed to actually create ISIS. And so the idea that we have some sort of command and control authority over ISIS, I'm not buying. What we do is again, we allow things to happen that we could otherwise prevent, and so we let ISIS get away with things that we normally would interdict, but we don't in this case, and we may have other entities being allowed to supply ISIS with intelligence and things that to carry out the attack, for instance, that they carried out in Iran, or they claim to have carried out. But they would have done that in concert with CIA-controlled resources in Iran, but not with direct CIA. I mean, I don't think a CIA person met with an ISIS person. I think a CIA-controlled Iranian resource was given permission to work with ISIS to do this, but the CIA sort of went, we're hands off on this one. I hope that answered the question.
All right, let's take another question. This is from Alex G. in Los Angeles. Would you please evaluate the possibility of Iran possessing a conventional first strike capability against Israel's ground-based nuclear forces?
I had a discussion with an extremely senior Iranian government official, maybe the highest level of Iran, and we talked about Iran's conventional deterrence. I spoke about how the world is fearful of a potential Iranian nuclear program, et cetera, and I brought up the importance of conventional deterrence, and does Iran seek to possess that? And the short answer was yes. Iran, in pursuing its ballistic missile capability, is pursuing a deterrent capability. To have the hypersonic, long-range hypersonic strike capability gives Iran first strike potential against Israel against the United States against United States forces in the region. Are these weapons strong enough to take out the Israeli bunkers where these weapons are stored, or the silos? I don't know. I think their weapons are more geared towards striking other strategic targets like government targets, infrastructure targets, etc. On the belief that that's what's going to deter Israel, the certainty that Israel would be destroyed through conventional weapons as opposed to trying to preemptively destroy Israeli nuclear weapons. Because understand this, Israel has submarines as well, and those submarines are equipped with cruise missiles that have nuclear warheads. So even if you take out the ground launched missiles, you're going to get nuked. So the idea is to convince Israel that even if they fire a nuclear weapon against Iran, that Iran has enough conventional power to physically destroy Israel. Therefore, the balance of terror offsets one another.
All right, let's do a phone call and then the coin giveaway. Hey there, you're on with our favorite weapons inspector. What is your very concise question?
Hi there.
Hi.
Calling from Germany. I'm a big fan, and I want to thank you both for this great job that you guys are doing. Thanks a lot. I have 3 questions.
No, one question.
Okay, Kidira. I felt did he have did he suffer embarrassment because of the fact that he exposed his weakness in the public about trying to get his family off? I mean, I felt very bad also that Scott was in that position. But how do you feel about it, and will it have repercussions for him that he tried to do that?
Okay, thanks for the call.
I think he's talking about the list of Ukrainian prisoners of war. Is that what he's talking about, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what he means.
Yeah, look, first of all, I don't think Kadyrov suffered any embarrassment from it. It is what it is. I'm not going to get into trying to second guess or anything. I was graciously received by Ramzan Kadyrov, by the entire Chechen leadership. I don't believe they were trying to set me up. I believe that they thought that there might be some utility in what they were doing, and but it became clear, both from my standpoint and from theirs, that this was not going to happen, and that's that. Kadyrov, what's there to recover from? It's over. It's done with. He's still the leader of the Chechen Republic. He's revered by the people of Chechnya, and I don't believe he suffered any dire consequences because of this. It's a minor hiccup in what was otherwise a fantastic meeting.
All right. As promised, the New Year's coin, a special limited edition made for Scott's trip to Russia. And that's what it looks like. It comes with a card. And we are going to do a giveaway right now for everybody who entered on... Hold on a second. Where is it? Why does this keep happening? Hang on, I'll find it again. Share screen. Okay, there it is. All right. So 570, as I'm speaking, even more entering, 580 people have entered this time, Scott. I think that's the most entrants we've ever had.
That's a record. That's a record.
It is indeed. This people they're lusting for this coin. All right, let's do the drawing to see who the winner is. And it's Lorraine Taleng Safi. Congratulations, Lorraine. Send us an email, info@ustourofduty.org, so we know how to send the coin to you. Thanks to everybody who entered. And if you would like to buy, well, we're not yet selling this coin, but The challenge coin that Scott gave away on his previous trip is for sale at scottrittermerch.com, as is a couple of T-shirts. That's one of them there. I'll just show one of them today very briefly, and also Scott's book, Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika, autographed by the author himself. Let's try to squeeze in a couple more questions if you have it in you, Scott. How you feeling?
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Stephen Krug in Bellwood, Pennsylvania. What are your thoughts on coin programs in the United States? Is gang stalking, line of sight surveillance, and disruption part of a weaponized counterinsurgency program? Do you know what the criteria is to enroll someone? I have no idea what the hell any of this means. Maybe you do, maybe
coin
you
is counterinsurgency. I don't know if he's talking about, domestic counterinsurgency, which would be a law enforcement thing, as opposed to a military, a doctrine of counterinsurgency. For instance, what we did in Afghanistan and Iraq. So I have to honestly say that I don't know enough about the question to answer it properly, because I don't know if he's talking about domestic counterinsurgency, because that's a law enforcement thing, and I'm really not that familiar with it, or there's Lauren doing the happy dance, and or if it's a military thing. So I can't answer the question. I apologize.
All right. Better to say you don't know than to fake it. Theo in France. There have been recent reports that North Korean rockets have been used by Russia in attacking Ukraine. Is this Russia simply being pragmatic at the moment, or is there a military codependency developing between these two nations? You didn't use the word codependency, but you kind of alluded to this a few minutes ago.
Well, first of all, Russia will never be codependent with anybody. One of Russia's foreign policy objectives is self-sufficiency, and that's self-sufficiency across the board. So Russia will never be codependent, but understand that Russia is in the process of expanding its military from 900,000 to 1.5 million. So these are new formations being built up at a time when they're in this very intensive combat operation in Ukraine. And so, as Russia builds up, for instance, the 70,000 strong St. Petersburg military district, or reinforcing Arctic operations, or the Pacific, or, beefing up their presence in the Caucasus or in Central Asia, or, getting forces, prepared to, deal with any threat from the Baltics. Weapons that would, that could be sent to the front in Ukraine are being diverted to build up these new units. And so you're building up these units for long-term employment by Russia, which means you want the Russian equipment. When you have a table of organization equipment, TONE, it's going to be Russian equipment. But on the front, to meet firepower requirements, rather than, slow down the deployment of weapons to these new units that you've built, what they're doing is they're just plugging the gap with these North Korean weapons. It's a weapon of convenience. Russia will just bring in these North Korean weapons, and they're ready to fire. They're a unit. You bring them in. It ain't hard to do. You push a button, you salvo off stuff, you reload it, and that's that. And when the war's over, they can go ahead and put these systems in reserve, or they can scrap them or whatever. They're not going to need them. They're just they're a temporary solution, firepower solution to the military problem in the against Ukraine. But the real Russian weapons, the tornadoes and things of that nature, are going to these Russian units. So some are going to the front lines, but Russia needs a lot of firepower right now. This is a temporary fix to a temporary problem.
MC in the United Kingdom is our next questioner, I should say. How can the U.S. really say there's no evidence of genocide in Gaza? Do they have a special definition that excludes the destruction of the homes of an occupied people, or that can induce death by starvation, pestilence, and thirst?
Apparently we do have our own definition. It's an Israeli linked definition, meaning that anything that Israel does cannot be, by definition, genocide. It's funny how during the Battle of Mariupol in Ukraine, Russia was accused of of committing genocide against the Ukrainians with these false allegations, and accused of, cutting off water, cutting off this, destroying that. All the things that Israel's doing for real and magnified by, several orders of magnitude. But with Russia, we threw that word genocide around freely. With Israel, we won't allow it to enter the lexicon. But the bottom line is Israel is committing genocide. It's a matter before the International Court of Justice, and things look pretty bad for Israel right now on that front. Our column was supposed to drive in and and connect with each one of these these airborne bridgeheads, and it ended disaster. The British landed. They were supposed to land in a city that didn't have any defenders. There were 2 SS Panzer divisions refitting in the area. And the 1st Airborne Division was virtually annihilated. You can't just land forces, and you've got to logistically sustain them. The Marines, when you do an amphibious operation, we can put forces across the beach, but then we have to continuously flow supplies into them. And we can do that for a short period of time, but eventually we have to get a port facility, and then send in the heavy equipment there. It's not a simple operation. It's logistically difficult to sustain, and once you do it, you have to commit to it. And that's not Russia's goal. I mean, Russia's goal isn't to conquer territory. I think everybody should understand that. We now know this is the case because when Russia negotiated with Ukraine in March and April of 2022, they basically said, we don't want to keep any territory. It was never our goal. We'll give it all back. In fact, as a good faith measure, they withdrew from the Kiev, Sumy, Chernihiv regions, withdrew from those, gave that territory back, and they were willing to give everything back. The Donbass had declared its independence, but the Russians were willing to work with, Ukraine to get the Donbass to be incorporated into Ukraine, sort of like a Chechen-like autonomous region. Where they had local autonomy, but they'd be part of a larger federation. Of course, the Ukrainians rejected this, but Russia had no intention of seizing territory. It was only after the Ukrainians rejected that and they carried out a NATO-assisted counteroffensive that Russia said, "Okay, screw it, hold referendum. We own these territories now; they belong to us." But Russia's goal hasn't been to punch through and seize Ukrainian territory. The goal is the destruction of the Ukrainian military. And that's what they're doing. 500,000 Ukrainian casualties, most of them dead. What is it? Oh, I forgot the whip.
It's Tuesday, the lightning round. All right.
Why does it take territory? That's the whole thing.
All right. The next question is from Buldak in Quebec. I find it puzzling that Ukraine's often unwilling conscripted soldiers throw themselves into suicide missions and even choose death over surrender. What happens behind the curtains to turn some guy forcefully pulled off the streets into an obedient soldier willing to lay down their life in battle?
Well, first thing we have to understand is when a Ukrainian soldier is conscripted, it's not as though the entire Ukrainian military is a conscript force. There's still a large number of, even despite all the casualties that Ukraine has suffered, there's still a large number of, regular forces, well-trained, et cetera. Just like in the German army, even though they had the Volkssturm, the old men and the kids, there were units, regular army units that had veterans. Veterans had been around since 1941, combat-hardened soldiers. There's combat-hardened troops in Ukraine today. The fresh meat generally are taken to hold a sector of the front line, freeing up the more experienced forces to carry out the assaults. The assaults are not being carried out by these conscripts. They don't have the training to do that. The training they have basically allows them to go them into a dugout and hold terrain and do basic rudimentary defense. But the offensive operations are carried out by the more experienced troops, and so they're the ones that are being slaughtered in these attacks, and the conscripts are being slaughtered in the Russian counterattacks.
Do you see these videos I was showing while you were talking? And in general, have you seen all the videos that are purported to be Ukrainian soldiers forcing people off the streets to serve in the military. Can you see that?
No, yep, I've seen these over and over and over again. Yeah.
Are they authentic?
They appear to be, but I'm not in a position to independently corroborate the authenticity of these videos.
Right. Some of them have audio, and I guess that if you understood what was being said, well, that's too much in the distance. I guess if one understands what they're said from the context of it, that might help, confirm what's going on there. But it does seem to be the case. Is that an issue that you've addressed before, Scott?
What's
the forcing the people off the street or wherever to serve?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it before. It's an indicator. Look, Russia's getting 1,500 volunteers a day for the special military operation. 1,500 volunteers a day. Just to put this in context, the United States military was 60,000 short of their recruiting goal. I mean, we can't recruit people. Because nobody wants to join the military nowadays. The Army had to readjust. The British Navy had to retire 2 ships so they could take the crews to crew up 1 new ship, because nobody's joining the British Navy. Nobody wants to join NATO. The NATO military is an empty shell. Russia's getting 1,500 guys a day volunteering to go to war to defeat Ukraine. Ukraine right now is a manpower crisis. They don't have men. They've lost them all. It's a huge front line, and they're very thinly spread right now. You're going to see a general retreat, a collapse very soon, because they got nothing left to man it. They're talking about taking in women. They're talking about taking in young kids. They're talking about taking in old men, and any fighting age guys they get are being, brought in unwillingly. Nobody wants to go to the front lines now because there is only one outcome. You're going to die.
All right. I don't know if that Scott was finishing there or if he's frozen or both, but let's try to move on. I think the internet is frozen. Next question is from Eric Rodriguez in Panama. And I can't read this with full confidence that Scott can hear it, because are you there, Scott?
I'm
I'm
here. Yep.
Cut. All right. How practical would it be for Hamas and the Palestinian Authority to establish Gaza and the West Bank as an Iranian protectorate, similar to Puerto Rico's relationship with the USA, in an effort to address the conflict?
That's the most impractical thing in the world. The Iranians wouldn't do it. They're not in the business of territorial acquisition, and the last thing they want is to get entangled in Palestinian politics and on the ground. Hamas is a Sunni entity. Iran is a Shia entity that believes in the supremacy of the supreme leader, Vilayat Faqih, and the 2 totally incompatible religious systems. So no, it's probably the most impractical thing in the world. More impractical than continuing the current Israeli-Palestinian relationship.
Okay, let's take a voicemail message from an anonymous caller.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for answering our questions while traveling through Russia. Now, to my
Did
question,
my answer come through?
I can understand the importance of Mykolaiv to secure Odessa once taken by the Russian army, so that Ukraine does not pose danger to the Russian Navy around Crimea. But can you explain the strategic importance?
I was playing a voicemail message. You can't hear it, Scott? Internet problems again. Damn it. Darn it all.
Jeff, can you hear me at all?
Very little. You're coming in and out very intermittently.
Nothing?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Bueller?